Oh, well, there we go. I had to pause there. Get my new hair all done. Still kind of scruffy. Welcome to the pre-show. This is the pre-show live. The good shit starts in 12 minutes. This is the pre-good shit, where I will talk about getting a haircut. I will spill some tea on my desk. I'm just pouring it over here. Don't you worry, it's getting poured out right now. This is the fun part. We pour the tea in the pre-show, and then we add to it consistently throughout our show. So it's never like it's like if you go to a nice party and they're just constantly filling your glass of wine up, and you're just like, "Am I getting drunk? It's been one glass that I've been on this whole time." That's what it's like for my bladder. Like a frog slowly boiling in water, my bladder gets more and more full, and it never really realizes. I don't have a measure of how many cups of tea I've had. It just seems like one continuous tea. Let's have a sip out of this mug with a Q on it. I'm going to slam QAnon too. Yes, I got a haircut. It looks rather snappy, I do think. The reason for this haircut is because I had my side shaved and I was growing the top out, and I reached the decision. I was like, okay, I want to grow all of my hair out. But the trouble with that is you look like a huge dork as you're doing that because you've got this little fuzzy coconut bit on the side here, and then you've got long hair up top. And what do I do? And I look kind of like a guy from the 1990s with a big undercut. That was the era I came of age, by the way, the 90s. Um, so we've cut it down. It's kind of layered, and but it still gets to be big and coiffed, which is very fun for me. My hair tends to naturally go towards volume and bigness, so that's what we've got. Hello, people that are here. Put your name in the comments. You know how this goes. Let us know who's with me. It's more fun that way, I promise. So let's see. Talked about getting a haircut. Nailed that. That's been handled. Sometimes people see there will be cheese fries, Senyuka. Absolutely, without a doubt. Hello, Sherifat from Nigeria. My hair is different. Yep. Sherifat, I don't know if you're here for the cheese fries, but there will be cheese fries as well. Hello, Stephanie. Nice to see you. Good hello. Um, I'm going to slam QAnon because I feel it's kind of my duty. That guy's kind of faded away, but people sometimes see me drinking out of this mug and they're like, oh, it's a Q, which is for Quiney, my last name. But some people make the mistake of thinking that I'm supporting this bozo called QAnon who sprouts stupid rumors about pedophile rings and stuff like that. And there's a little present for me today because someone had reached out on my profile to say, hello, Adam, I love what you're up to. Great. I love it when people love what I'm up to. And then immediately launched into telling me about this water that they're drinking and how great it is and how it cured them of all these things and blah, blah, blah. So typically, not always, but typically that means that they have joined one of the many multi-level marketing groups that are selling products like alkaline water. The idea being if you take water and you do something to it, you can change its chemical composition. It's still water, but now it's at a lower pH level. And that's fine, right? I'm totally fine for people to hold that belief. I don't need people to have a different belief. It's okay. I used to need people to have a different belief. I needed people to believe the same thing I believed. And so I'd be very aggressive and militant and frankly unpleasant if you held a different belief than mine. Like if you held a belief that I didn't feel met scientific rigor, then I was going to come at you and try to help you, but really kick you in the head to get you to the appropriate belief, which was the one I held. None of that really, a lot of that sort of lost its sex for me since getting into this work and starting to see like there's not really an objective truth, or at least there isn't one that we have any hope of seeing. There's just my truth. And does my truth serve and support me to create what I want to create in my life? That being said, I still have opinions. And so my opinions are that the scientific method is a brilliant invention. It's a great discovery. And what it does, it doesn't solve all our problems. It doesn't fix everything, but it allows us to sort of really get out in front of some of our humanity. And our humanity, the way it shows up in terms of like our approach to science is that If I take a pill and suddenly subjectively I feel better, I'm going to naturally make the conclusion that this pill solves this problem. But there's a billion reasons outside of the pill being the solution for why that might have happened. Like maybe I was just regressing towards the mean. Maybe my pain was at the high point when I sought out this pill, and your pain's naturally going to come towards like an average over time. And so maybe I took this pill right at the high point and it naturally regressed. If I'd done nothing, the same thing would have happened. Maybe it's the placebo effect. Maybe it's blah, 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 blah. So there's a billion different factors. And what I think is magnificent about science is that it, just like coaching supports me to get out in front of my ego by having someone that has my back and exists outside of the swirl and the what I know, the knowing in my own head. Hey, Anna. Science supports us to get outside of the swirl of our own ego when it comes to like trying to determine scientific facts and truths like that in the world. QAnon, not what this mug represents, but I'm using that right now just to point to him. QAnon is someone who has been sprouting really memes about things like the Democratic Party of the United States of America is a secret ring of pedophiles, and they run pedophile rings in the basements of pizza parlors. Hey, Adam. And if this sounds ludicrous to you, that's probably because you are more inclined towards a bit of a rigorous methodology in your thinking. The people drawn into this stuff are drawn into it, and then they get really, it's almost like you can imagine they get wrapped into this mental kind of merry-go-round, and then they get really concerned and really frustrated. It's the same sort of thing that triggered a lot of concern about Wayfair, where someone saw that Wayfair charged different prices for different products and then got really like drew their own conclusion that the reason for that is because Wayfair is trafficking children. And this is the way they're trafficking children is they're putting a product on their website and you can just order that way. And that's all there is to it. And if we think about this sort of stuff, it's like, wouldn't it make more sense to hide that maybe just behind a password? Like if you were selling children, wouldn't one step further of like putting that behind a password so not just anyone can come and accidentally buy a abducted child? Like we can, it doesn't take a lot of critical thinking, but people like QAnon and stuff like that muddy the pot and create these vortices, these bags of quicksand that people fall into, and it ruins things and it gets people trapped, and it has people fall into conversations like, well, I think we should research every case of pedophilia and claims of pedophilia. Which on the one hand is like, yeah, pedophilia is a serious problem and child abduction is just one of the worst crimes, and like that cannot be debated. And just because someone cries wolf doesn't always mean we should run towards it and drop everything that we're doing and go towards that and solve that. So if I just told you suddenly like that the pizza restaurant I don't like down my street is carving up humans and serving it, you should bring a little critical thinking before you jump to the next step being, I need to go and take down these cannibals, right? So it's not that we shouldn't investigate this stuff. It's that there's a series of steps for us to walk through before we go to that as our conclusion. And those steps would be kind of like the critical thinking that's brought forward in science. So anyhow, QAnon's a bozo. Conspiracy theories are fun, but at least for me, and this doesn't have to be your perspective, but for me, they remind me a lot of the video games I used to play in the early days of the internet. Back when I did, Evan, I did. And I got a haircut. So it's all shit's just flown away. This is the pre-show. This is where I share my opinions and I complain about things. And then we get into distinctions after this. And I know I've lost you. It's been nice, like all of what we've created together, but you and Peter will probably never listen to me again. Yeah, so conspiracy theories to me remind me a lot. Hey, Allison. They remind me a lot of MUDs. MUDs, MUDs stood for multi-user dungeon. And this was back when the internet was entirely text-based, and you'd log in and it would say like, you are at a fountain. You see Grog the Despoiler and a merchant next to the fountain. What do you do? And you could type like, talk to Grog the Despoiler, steal from merchant, travel east, and so on and so forth. So it was all text-based. Thanks, Evan. Appreciate that. And these games are cool because you're playing this big, massive game and you can partner up with people and go do stuff. It's just like games these days. But what started to happen for me was first I got really absorbed in them. And then I noticed that what was happening was I was killing the monster so I could acquire the bigger weapon, so I could kill the bigger monster, so I could acquire the bigger weapon, so I could, and you get the idea. It just was always, there's always a next thing, and it never really wrapped up in any kind of satisfying way. And that's how conspiracy theories occur for me, is that people who are really convinced and bought into them, or people purveying them, are always like, the evidence is just around the corner and it's going to blow the roof off everything, and then there's another claim for that, and it never really resolves into anything. And so for people where that is satisfying, for people where they're like, yeah, that, like, this is interesting to me and I want to pursue that, great. You know, I recognize I can't do anything to change their mind, and that's okay. It's not really any of my business to change their mind. But when people bring that to me, this is how I share with them. Is like, if that's satisfying for you, that's awesome. I find that a deeply unsatisfying inquiry to be in. And so I just don't have a lot of time for it. I got way more interesting things to turn my attention to. So, no, not QAnon. This is for Quiney, a much cooler version of Q. Yes, Carrie, great Skyrim reference. Skyrim was cool. Lord of the Rings plot, yes. Anna, are you playing Rogue now? Because I've been playing NetHack a lot, as you probably know, and that's quite that game. I think Rogue has an ending though, doesn't it? Rogue's like NetHack, I believe, where you eventually ascend and it's finished. I know that's the case in NetHack. You start with the character, you go all the way to the bottom of the dungeon, and then you climb all the way to the top, and you become a demigod. Which I don't want to brag now, but I've ascended 5 times, which is crazy because for those of you that have any inkling of NetHack, that's very uncommon. It took me 20 years to ascend, and I've been playing this game since like 1990. So I've been playing this game for a long ass time. It's taken that long to ascend. Anyhow, yes, Skyrim's cool, as are you, clearly, Carrie, for your reference. Evan, you're clearly cool for making a Lord of the Rings reference. And Anna, obviously, you're cool too for still being here, even though I've attacked your precious conspiracy theories and because you watch Peter playing Rogue Legacy. Okay. Something I want to recommend to you this week is a podcast I just finished listening to. I'm going to talk about this and then we're going to get into our topics. So the podcast is called Welcome to Your Fantasy, and you might have seen me post about this briefly on Facebook. I just posted right after I finished it. Welcome to Your Fantasy is a 9-episode podcast, so it's contained, about Chippendales. And if you're not from North America, you might not be familiar with Chippendales. Chippendales was a cultural phenomenon, and it was male strippers. Male strippers, not targeted towards gay men, but targeted towards women. And so in the 80s and kind of the 90s, Chippendales blew up. It became this group of guys that you just knew them. You knew the name. It was a running joke. You'd see them on like daytime talk shows like Phil Donahue or Sally Jesse Raphael or Maury Povich. If any of you remember these shows. I remember sometimes we'd have a babysitter and then she'd watch that and like Divorce Court on TV while she was babysitting us during the day. And then I'd tell my mom about it. My mom would be like, I don't know if I like my son watching Divorce Court. Anyhow, it happened and I love those shows now. So that's how that went. So anyhow, Chippendales, male strippers, running kind of joke. But at the same time, there's this crazy story behind it, like how it got created, how the owner ended up partnering with like an Emmy award winning children's like choreography show, then paid someone to murder that guy, killed him, would have gotten away for it, except that once he'd had a taste of blood, he went further and started trying to get other people murdered and paid someone to travel all the way to Europe to stab some other dancers who'd started their own show with cyanide. Like, that's crazy. And there's just so much of like fascinating stuff behind this silly kind of veneer of like burly, lubed up men tearing off their clothes. And so first of all, it's just a fascinating story. I never would have guessed all of like the drugs and the murder and the craziness that existed behind this. And in the last episode, which was probably my favorite, they had a whole bunch of historians talking about both the research they did for this podcast, as well as like how interesting it is to look at um, the phenomenon, the cultural phenomenon of Chippendales through our current lens, and to sort of like some of the things they're talking about was, was so interesting because Chippendales was sold. The myth of it was kind of sold like it's female empowerment. We're really empowering women. Finally, women get to be in control, but it's a very like stereotypical, aggressive, heterosexual kind of like empowerment. And they're also talking about how it's kind of like, yeah, women are empowered, but the empowerment's really that you get to stuff money down male strippers' pants. We're not going to give you like more money, more salaries, more rights, or anything like that. So there's this funny kind of tension where it's like, yay, empowerment, but this way. And we're not actually going to do the stuff that would really make a difference. And so they look at this through like a cultural lens, and it is just fascinating. So I'm going to share the link with this because it is a great listen. I've been listening to it while I was working out on the Peloton bike in the mornings. I turn off the music and the instructors. I turn the subtitles on and then I listen to podcasts like this. So this is a great podcast if you're looking for something to listen to on a drive or a walk or while you're exercising. Highly recommend it. Really well told story, well researched, really cool cast, and fascinating group of characters that you get to know and learn about. All right. We've got some lavender Earl Grey. It's a good way to start the day, start this Friday off. So, well, what are we going to talk about? Let's see. What do we have? I'm going to turn the lighting down. My monitor seems that feels better. Yeah, it's a bit bright on the monitor. Let's dive into some of these topics. So we'll start with Miles. Miles, thanks for your topic. Miles writes, when does the feeling of duty get in the way of growth? And then there was a whole sub thread that grew out of that because he said duty and then, Chandler Bing and duties and all of that. We're going to just bypass that part aside from me mentioning it right now. And we're going to talk about this. So when does the feeling of duty get in the way of growth? So let's talk about, I guess, duty as a starting point, which is kind of like obligation. There's a way I need to show up. I have a duty to do something, as opposed to here's the next thing for me to do that would really cause my transformation. So the interesting thing about all of this is, yeah, there it is, Evan. Thank you. Someone had to do it. Thanks for being the one to do it. There's the thing about this is that for literally anything, we could grab any kind of way of showing up in your life and replace duty with that thing. So we could say, when does the feeling of duty get in the I'm going to really hit that T hard now. When does the feeling of duty get in the way of growth? When does the need for freedom get in the way of growth? When does a rigid adherence to structure get in the way of growth? So it's not really about duty, even though that's the particular conversation we're going to be having. It's actually just about literally anything, any way of being, any way of showing up in your life that becomes a automatic. That's where we get blocked in our growth. That's where we get blocked in our transformation. Because as soon as something becomes automatic, meaning it's not something I have any more choice about, I no longer have choice. And now I'm on rails. As soon as a situation shows up that triggers this particular thing, I don't get to choose how I show up in my life. I don't get to choose what would best serve the moment. I'm on rails like a train is. I just have to go in the direction of those tracks. So here we're looking at duty tracks. Fun, right? Duty tracks. A new flavor of ice cream from Baskin Robbins. Fun side fact, I worked at Baskin Robbins for about a year and a half. I was a terrible employee. I stole from the cash register, and eventually I got fired. As I was doing amends work, when I was going through like 12-step recovery work, that was one of the big ones that was there for me to clean up with my relationship with spirit. Hello, Alexandra. Good evening. So, the feeling of duty, as we're describing it, would kind of be like there is a way that I ought to show up, and that way I need to follow, even if it's not necessarily what I want. So we could say like, well, here's an example. I have a friend who's he's Indian, And part of the cultural norm, at least in his family, I don't know if this is everywhere, but in his family, is like their father passed away, and so he experiences kind of like he is now the man, and so all of the burden, there's like this duty, this obligation placed on him to do everything that the father must do. So okay, that's there, and he's chosen that. I don't know to what extent he's really actually chosen it ontologically speaking, but he's following along with it. So he's operating from this place like, I have a duty to pay for my sister's wedding. I have a duty to support my whole family, all of them. I have a duty to. So that's not right or wrong. It's not like, oh, the correct thing to do would be not that, or the correct thing to do is that. The place where this gets in the way of his own growth is, what do you really want as a human being? What is actually going to make the biggest difference in your life? Is it to choose into this? Is it that you really want to do this and this opens you up and sets you free and has you live a bigger life? Or is it sort of like, well, I got to do this, and then you're just pulling along this iron ball called my duty, and that's all there is to it? And so that's an example where the duty gets in the way of his own transformation, his own growth, because he no longer has any choice. It's just something he's saddled with because of the way life unfolded, because of what happened in his life. That's how it is. Sorry, you kind of just accept it. And then where people tend to end up from this place is resigned. So the best form of resignation in these situations is like, yeah, I'd love to do that stuff, but it's okay because, and then they try to find reasons why they're glad that they're doing what they're doing. But what happens is they're not willing to own their own like frustration. They're not willing to own their own desires because that puts them in conflict with the duty that they now feel they have to honor. And so what ends up happening is all of their humanity, all of their possibility, all of their self-expression gets shoved down, and they're just operating along the rails provided by what is my duty and obligation. Different cultures have different versions of this. So in a lot of Asian cultures where family and frankly like collective identity is much more important and emphasized than individual identity. Hey, Tommy. Duty plays a much larger role. It doesn't matter what you want as an individual, it matters for the collective. So there is a kind of cultural embeddedness of this. This is just much more present. Here in the West, we put much more much more attention, much more emphasis on your individual identity. So you can see this in America, in Canada. We'll look to America because it's so pronounced right now. We know that wearing masks makes a difference. And you don't have to think a lot about this to get on board with it. Like you can argue that science isn't all the same, it's not completely true, but like if I talk to you like this versus like this, it doesn't take, it's not a very far leap to be like, that's going to block, even if I just put a piece of tissue paper over my mouth, that's going to block some of the aerosol from my mouth. So you don't have to go too far. And it's okay if you're like, well, it's not quite as big a deal as people think, or it doesn't make, that's not really the point here. The real point here is that in the West, rather than duty being the thing that tends to bind us, it's our insistence on our own individual freedom. And what that does is it means that anytime I'm presented with a situation that might take from my individual freedom, I'm on rails. And the rails I'm on is, fuck that, I'm going to do what works best for me as an individual, and you can't impinge on that. So we don't have much capacity to, our resistance is in the other direction. So where duty, where cultural, like the collective identity is more emphasized, duty becomes a thing. And we say, no, 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 even though I want to go down this path, this is the right thing for me to do. Whereas on the other side of the tracks, here in the West, it tends to be more, no, 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 this is my individual right, and you can't make me do anything. And the truth is that there isn't a right answer to any of this. As a leader, the only thing we're really concerned about is what's called for that would move this particular situation where I'm committed to showing up as a leader forward. And how does my resistance get in the way of that? So if what would be, I'm just going to try to make up an example. Don't poke it too hard because it'll fall down. And it's more important that you kind of get the spirit of the example I'm offering rather than poke holes in how this example doesn't really work. But it'd be like if what I was committed was to people, I don't know, let's just say wearing masks. That's not even a very good one. Well, I don't know how to set this up, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's not that interesting. The point, though, is if what I was committed was to lowering the incidence rate of something like the pandemic, and the easiest thing with the most amount of scientific evidence behind it was like, just wear a mask. That's simple. But I relate to that as an imposition on my individual rights. Well, now as a leader, I can't model and cause the thing to happen that would have the biggest impact. So I end up doing these weird workarounds. This is why we see things like, you know, for a lot of people, at least people in Canada, for the most part, we're like, just ban assault rifles. This is obvious. Obviously, if you stop giving people assault rifles, there's going to be less deaths by assault rifles. But instead, because people are so resistant to that and they can't let go of it, they can't see another possibility. And so what ends up happening is you get these kludged together sort of solutions, but they're weird. You're like, no, but that's why would you? It's like someone's like, oh yeah, I want to go from here to there, and this is the route that makes the most sense. It's because they have some resistance, something stuck there that they can't let go of. And so consequently, this is how duty gets in our way, just like an insistence on my rights as an individual gets in my way, just like wherever you hold a sacred cow gets in your way. Yeah, Alexandra, I'm with you. The important thing to note is that our cultural differences and what's given to us in a culture does not have to dictate us. So it's really interesting because, um, if you work, anytime I work with clients that are from a more of an Asian descent, this is one of the sticky points. And it's true that if you want to create a different way of showing up in your life, you're going to butt into the memes, so to speak, the norms of your culture. But this is also true, like, and then, sorry, then what happens is it's like, well, I can't do that because we just don't do it that way. You don't understand Asian culture, or well, here's how it is, Adam, which is really the same thing if I went to a lawyer and they asked me for support and I started pointing to how they just booked themselves completely full. They're going to say, well, Adam, you just don't understand how the legal profession works. There's no way that I can create windows of time because I have to be available at any moment. So our culture is just one of many places where we buy into a prevailing worldview. Here's how it is. Here's the right way for us to show up. And it's not really about the culture. It's not really about your job as a lawyer. It's not really about your job as a teacher. It's not really about any of that. It's that all of those things are the shape of the world you've chosen to fit yourself into. Maybe you haven't even chosen it. Maybe it's just what you've risen up into. But there's a point where if you want to continue your own self-expression as a human, that's going to come into conflict with the prevailing cultural views. It has to, because a cultural set of views is kind of like a dominant one size fits all, everyone conforms to this, and not everyone is the same way. Now, having said that, we have to accept certain perspectives like murdering people is wrong. If you're like, my self-expression is murdering people, that's fine, but like we've kind of collectively made a commitment that that's not okay. But choosing to follow your own path and trusting that and learning to buy into that, and as a result, might mean that you tell someone, hey, I can't afford to pay for your wedding or whatever. That's a little different than the weird example I just came up with about murdering. So I don't know how well I did explaining what you asked about, Miles, but that's my answer to when the feeling of duty gets in the way of growth. Now, Andrea asks an excellent, well, provides an excellent topic, which is, I'm just going to read what she wrote. Thanks for this, Andrea. The balance between self-awareness, self-work, and just being yourself. In other words, where's the line in being able to show up as you are and just be you without feeling like you have to pick the thicket of personality apart with a stick all the time? And then she also says, yes, I did get a musical theater reference in there, which I at all did not get, but I think it's called Into the Woods was the musical theater piece she quoted. So if you recognize that, you get a bonus point and I don't. So really the conversation I hear Andrea asking, or the topic, the heart of this is like there's always going to be something available for me beyond the world I've currently created and that I currently know. There's always, forever, there's going to be, here's the world I've currently got. This is my current worldview. And there's always going to be more possibility available beyond that. You will always have an edge. I will always have an edge. Everyone will always have an edge. And that is true just by virtue of the fact that every belief is inherently limiting. So if I have a belief that like, well, whatever, come up with any belief you like, there's an inherent limitation to that because a belief imposes a way things are on the world. And some people try to like get around this by saying, well, I just have a belief. I just don't have beliefs. Ha, I've solved it. Well, that's a belief. You can't get out of this. So we're better off to stop trying and to sort of sit like, okay, got it. As a starting point, I'm just going to accept the fact that every belief is inherently limiting, including this one. And therefore, really the conversation to be in is, does this belief empower what I'm up to currently? As opposed to what's the one true belief, the one ring I can fit on my finger that then I've arrived and now I've bested my ego and I'm never going to be limited ever again. You're always going to be limited to some extent. The corollary to that is you will always have an edge. There's always going to be more available for you. That's a great thing. It means that life will never be boring if you choose to relate to it that way. Life is a mountain with no top. We can climb it indefinitely. So now where that leaves us is like, okay, so then how do I choose between like, I just want to be comfortable here versus like always looking for how we're limiting ourselves? Like, where am I stopped now? And that can become kind of a addiction unto itself. Like you'll meet people like, almost kind of like me actually, is you'll meet people where we're we're fixated on like, now I need to look here and I need to look there. Can I trust what there is for me to do here? And what about this? And like, oh, I want to share this truth, but how do I trust that? And maybe I need to take another look. So this is like a place I can readily get stuck. Part of which is because I have a I have a judgment about a lot of the coaching profession, which is that a lot of the coaching and the leadership profession, my judgment is that a lot of it are people that are just they're not doing their work, so they're stalled out, and then they've created a bunch of strategies to keep out the parts of their life that they can't be with, and then they're selling those strategies to you. So it's like, as an example, I used to be sad all the time, but now I'm never sad, and life is always moment by moment joy filled and happy. Well, I say that's fucking bullshit. And what you've learned to do is how to not have to be with sadness. Part of life is sadness. It's sad when we lose someone we love. It's sad when we're left heartbroken. It's sad at the end of the movie when the leads don't get together and they end up breaking up. That's sad, and that's okay. So the real work is, how can I learn to be with sadness so that I don't need to never have sadness around me, but so that I can just totally be at peace with sadness, just like I can be at peace with happiness. So I've got this judgment, right? That's what most of the coaching profession is about, is selling you the strategies that people have enacted to avoid having to be with what they can't be in their own life. Which, if you wanted to go a little deeper, is basically, let me sell you the way that I've contracted from life. So I'm going to help you contract in your life the same way I've contracted in my life, because both of us cannot be with the same thing. And so I figured out how I don't have to be with it, and I'm going to help you not have to be with it. A lot of people will buy this, by the way, because that's the easier path. It's easier to push life out than to stay open for all of it, which is what naturally happens anyhow as we age. You'll notice as people age, they can be with less and less. Their perspective narrows, their openness to new ideas narrows, and that's because that's the practice by default of human. Is, at first you grow and you age and a child's like being with everything, and then slowly but surely they learn to put armor on and to keep out certain things. Those people annoy me. That kind of job is boring. I don't like this. I don't like planning. It sucks. I want to be a free spirit. And so we push out all of the stuff we can't be with. And what that does is it slowly but surely narrows our world. The real work of transformation is like noticing how we narrow our world and then choosing to take the armor off that's safe about that, so that we can be more open, more exposed, and especially exposed to the stuff that we judge, don't like, don't want to be with. That's where the growth is. So As a result of my judgment, hey, quit poking me, Anna. As a result of my judgment about that coaching profession, I have no ability, I have no capacity to be within myself. I have a really hard time, like, I can sort of be like, here's how I currently feel. And then as soon as I allow that to be spoken, my next thought is, fuck, what if that's, oh man, what if that is my limitation? What if I'm closing and I need to fix that. And then I can jump into like more self-awareness and more self-work. I got to fix that too. And you can hopefully see if there will always be an edge, and the game from this that I'm engaged with out of my own fear is address the edge, fix the edge, make sure I'm not one of those people who is not doing their work. Well, that becomes a hamster wheel. It's a sexier sounding hamster wheel. It's like, yeah, transformational hamster. It's still fucking hamster wheel though, because I'm trying to impose a finite solution on something that's infinite. Right? If I was like, here's a bottomless pit, fill it with this dirt, shovel dirt into this bottomless pit until it's filled up and you've got the hole complete, you'd be like, no, that's stupid. That's a dumb thing you're trying to get me to do. That's the game that my ego will try to get me into. And that's a little bit what Andrea is talking about. So the way this works ultimately is that the opportunity in this, it's not what you have to do, it's the opportunity. The opportunity is, excuse me, to have space for our humanity. So for me, because I'm talking about how this relates to myself, the opportunity is for me to first start to develop some compassion for all the coaching profession and all these people that are playing that game that I judge, where it's like selling our own contraction as a solution to the places where you feel like you need to contract. And to really like, what if that's okay? What if that's on some level always going to be the case? What if we can't escape that? And that's just part and parcel of the package of being a human. So then I can allow myself some space to be doing that over here. I can allow myself the possibility of like, okay, I probably won't get this perfect. There's probably always going to be more work. There's always going to be an edge. Can I trust? This is the breakthrough path for me is, can I trust that I'm reliable and I've got enough support that I am doing the work? I'm not stalled and stagnated. And can I allow it to be okay that there is always going to be more work? There will always be an edge for me. And that I don't have to have it all solved and I don't have to be perfect. And that doesn't make me bad. And it doesn't make those people bad either. So I can allow all of us to just be exactly where we are. And so the way this ends up working for me is I know that there's going to be always a new place, a new opportunity to take a look and be like, oh crap, there's a place where I'm not doing my work. And frankly, if I'm working with the right people, if I'm holding the right containers, like my clients, the members of the Forge, members of the Creating Clients course, they're going to give me ample opportunity to see this. And can I trust that I have enough support that I don't really have to worry about this? I can stop being so vigilant to it and I can just trust. And so these days, that's what I spend my time doing, is when that fear shows up, rather than try to figure it all out, rather than try to make sure I've got the answer or, oh my God, you're so right, I got to fix this, rather than being a yes to every single piece of feedback that comes across my desk, I trust like life's bringing me the stuff that there is for me to work on, and I've got enough support that I'm reliable to have it reflected to me. I don't have to go out of my way to do that. And that's one of the beautiful things that working with a coach provides us. A lot of that work is kind of like me trying to be my own coach. I'm trying to like see my blind spot to make sure I don't have one. That's not my job. It's not my job. That's my coach's job. My job's to trust her to do that. And so from there, I can kind of just show up in life and I can offer you my best art in the moment, knowing that the art that Adam of 2 weeks from now can offer will be better than the art of Adam right now. And this is the best art I have to offer in this moment. And that becomes the game that we play. So great question, Andrea. And like, I think that's a classic place. I mean, Allison, it sounds like Allison, you're resonating with it, and Heather definitely like can really get it. It's easy to want to do this all right, but that's not a very fun game. It sounds noble, But that's where it's just another example of how our ego is going to take whatever we create, whatever structures you create, it's going to grab a hold of it and then try to use it to fit it back into its own structure. So my ego's like, ooh, coaching, cool. That's now the thing. Great. Let's use that as the thing to beat you over the head with, Adam, and to make you strive and keep going harder and harder and harder. Nah, I'm good, ego. I don't need that. Alexandra, just reading what you wrote. I love this. It's what I love about being in connection with others. Yes, the possibility of feedback and growth. So reassuring that there's people who will surely reflect when I mess up, relate to less hypervigilance angle. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the most beautiful things about working with a coach is like letting go of having to figure it out ourselves, which is kind of one of the great ironies is a lot of people they're resistant to coaching because they don't want to well really because there's a vulnerability in trusting that someone can see something I can't about me. Someone can support me to get to a level of depth and fuller expression deeper than I can get to myself. And so people resist that because then they can be the only one and they don't have to there's a safety, right? I'm doing it all myself. I don't have to let you see any of the flaws. But then it leads to this kind of hypervigilance and this exhaustion and it doesn't work because you're never going to be able to see your own blind spots. That's the definition of a blind spot. If you could just see your own blind spot, it's not a blind spot. It's just a neat concept. I want to talk about what you asked, Alexandra. How do you work with clients who come to coaching because they love the process or really like the coach, but they don't have a clear goal in mind? How do you facilitate discovery of that goal? So I'm going to couch this not just in coaching, but in any leadership conversation where people are like, the starting point for a lot of this is people are like, ooh, leader, that's a cool word. I should be more of a leader, or I want to be more of a leader, or more powerfully, I'm committed to being more of a leader. I want to be better at leader. I want to be better at being me. I want to be better at life. So, or I love the process of working with a coach is the other version of it, which is basically what's happening is people love this as a concept. So they're stoked about the notion of being a better human. So there's a couple of things we want to understand about this. First, let's talk about just your life as a conceptual thing as opposed to your life as a lived in thing. Or put differently, I would call it like approaching your life in the stands of it as opposed to being on the court. This is a Werner Erhard distinction. So talking about being a better leader, it's really I'm up in the stands. There's no skin in the game for me to make a claim or like a commitment or to say I'm here to be a better leader. Great. What does that mean? How do we hold your feet to the fire? How do we notice whether or not you've achieved that or failed at it? Well, I don't know. I guess I'll feel this way. Great. But like all that's going to give us is the way you feel in the current moment. So if you had a great week yesterday or last week, and I ask you, how are you doing on that goal? You're gonna be like, hell yeah, I'm leading the crap out of stuff. It's working. And if you had a bad week and someone wrote you a nasty email, you're gonna be like, this sucks. You know, I'm not really doing that good. We don't have any metric by which to determine if you're actually moving forward or backward. There's a tremendous safety in this, which is why we stick with concepts. It's why we hang out in the safety of being a better leader, being a better person, or loving the process of being coached, because it doesn't demand much of us. There's no point at which we have to be confronted by our own failings, our own shortcomings, our own not yet there yet. It's a bit funny how I worded it, but like, I'm not yet able to do this. I never have to confront that. So what happens is people get into leadership conversations or coaching relationships from this place. And then what you're doing is it's like you're playing pool with no pockets in the table. So you've got the balls, you've got all 18 or 17, was it 17? Eight, no, it's 7 for 15, all 15 balls, 7 of each type plus the black, the 8 ball. You've got all 17 balls in the cue ball and you're hitting the balls around and they're making a big noise and a racket and they're caroming off of each other and they're moving around. But so what? Where are we trying to get to? There's no actual place there's no anything we're trying to achieve in this person's life. So it's a real setup. And what it leads to is a lot of kind of, a lot of coaching is like this because a lot of coaches are so resistant to having their own feet held to the fire this way. Heather, you probably have an idea of what I'm talking about. I wonder if you'd be willing to share just in the comments some of your Heather and I work together, and I wonder if you'd be willing, Heather, just to share a little bit of your own experience about this, so people can kind of get another example of it aside from just me. So we resist having our feet held to the fire this way, and consequently we resist holding our clients' feet to the fire this way. And this happens with leaders too. I don't know, just let me do my thing. So what happens is it's not that we don't achieve anything in our life, it's just that the results we end up creating are the results we're already reliable for. So we create the same results we're already reliable for, which will include like a 10% increase in productivity because you're naturally going to get more efficient at whatever you're doing. And then we layer the nice feeling based idea of being a better leader on top of that, but nothing really changes because we're not held accountable to actually have anything change. All we're really accountable to is, do you feel today like you're being a better leader? Yes, I do. Great. Okay, I guess we're achieving it. So what there is to do with these people is to stand for them to start to draw a line in the sand, whether it's a leader or a coach or a client or whatever that you're working with, to actually, like, when people say, I love the process, or I really like the coach, and I totally want to work with you, great. What for? Why do this work? Oh, I just, I really want someone to hold my feet to the fire and like, and like be a stand for my greatness. Great. Why? What for? The reason that we stand for people this way is because what will predictably happen is that while something exists entirely as a concept, people are empowered by Heather, I was wondering if you would be willing to share about your own experience, you and I working together, and like just being invited to actually declare results, to draw a line in the sand, and to be like, here's what I'm going to create, and just how that's been for you. Because it might provide like a nice, just a way for people to kind of see, and like, I just want to bring more of you into the space because I know you're working through this right now. So what happens is people, when they have something existing as a concept, it's cool, right? Who wouldn't want to confront your fear, or to be a better leader, or to like help, conceptually, sure, let's end apartheid. That sounds amazing. I'm down. Let's do it. This is why when you float an idea on Facebook, just like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, who likes it? You'll get a million like, hell yeah. Then when you actually say, great, this is what it requires of you, are you in? You hear a lot of crickets. Is because you've shifted from a world, an idea that exists as concept only, into actual action required, into people having to now live as the thing you've put in front of them. And that is going to be it's far less, that's where the confrontation happens. So what'll happen if we take people on as clients, or we start to develop someone's leadership where all they've got to pull them forward is this concept, this idea of, I love the process. I want to be held powerfully to something. I really want to X, Y, or Z. I want to be a better leader. As soon as you start to actually bring some fire to them, they'll squirm away from it. They're not that interested anymore. They don't really want to do it. And so then they either quit or they pull back up into talking about concepts. And so all of the work hangs out in conceptual conversations. So the end result of that is you get a lot of conversations that are like, they're like bad therapy, where it's like you talk about stuff over and over and over. And, we're talking about stuff, so it sounds like we're getting somewhere. It might even feel that way, but nothing actually changes in the real world. It's just conversation after conversation after conversation. And it's like, now I notice I'm afraid to do something, and I notice I'm holding myself back. Let's talk about that. Great. What for? Why would we talk about that? Well, I want to learn why I'm doing that. Why? Well, because then I might be able to do something about it. What? What do you want to do? Where are you trying to get to for which this conversation might move you there? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, I'm mimicking the sort of like squirminess. That notice just how slippery it is, right? Every step of the way, people will resist getting really clear and declaring a goal. So first, what we want to understand is that when people don't have a clear goal in mind, that's the first place to support them. And we want to invite them into the conversation as a possibility, an opportunity, and invite them to consider, most of us have learned to not set goals because then we don't have to confront whatever shows up when we don't achieve it. And if you're trying to achieve something that's impossible currently in your life, you're not going to hit it. Predictably, you'll have to fail. That's the only way you'll learn how to do it. If I don't yet know how to ride a bike and I really want to ride a bike, I'm going to have to be willing at some point to get on the bike and fall off. There's no way that I can learn to ride the bike just by getting on it and magically it works perfectly. That's the fantasy. That's what we'd like. We're like, oh, I haven't been willing to ride the bike yet, but if I get a coach, then I'll just be able to get on I'll talk enough that then I can get on the bike and I'll just be able to ride it. No, that's never how it's going to work. So we want to invite them to consider this possibility and to consider they're going to have to move from conceptual into actually putting their feet on the ground and declaring some kind of result. And only then do we really have something to support them with. And so that's how I work with people like that. I applaud, like, got it. You really want to have your feet to the fire. You really want to make something happen. Great. What? What do you want to have happen? What do you want to bring into the world? What are you committed to? Why bother do any of this work? When this work becomes annoying and you stop enjoying the concept of me holding your feet to the fire and you actually have to be with the unpleasant experience of it, what for are we doing that aside from just having your feet held to the fire? What that does is it gets people clear on some actual goal and it puts the pockets in the billiard table. Now we can actually take steps towards something. And that's where the work really happens. A note about this is that it's been, I don't know where it stands currently, but it's been quite vogue in the coaching and the leadership conversations I'm privy to like make goals wrong. Don't focus on goals. Even James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is like focus on your system and your process rather than the goal itself. Well, you need both. So for some people where all they do is focus on the goal and then they quit, it's like, great, there's going to be a benefit to you getting clear on the actions to take, the system that you want to build. But for other people, it's like, well, actually what there is for you to do as a starting point is get clear, where are we trying to get to? Then we can put all our attention to like the other stuff. But until we have a direction we're going towards, there's no reason to do any of this stuff other than that it's a neat idea. And any conversation that's going to create a transformation for you will stop being neat very quickly. Most of the members of the Forge, we've been doing a lot of confrontation over the last month. This is the point where it's like we're pushing everyone off the precipice, forcing them to confront what they haven't yet been willing to confront. And a lot of the questions we ask when people are in their confrontation, I'm saying that word a little bit weird, but where we start is first getting them, understanding what's going on. But then often one of the things we're asking is like, what's the breakthrough that you're here to create again? So we can get present to what they're going towards rather than just, you're right, this is wrong, whatever, so that they've got a reason to be in the fire. They've got a reason to endure all of this, or rather to endure it, to like allow it to break them apart. We need a reason for it, and that goal is what it is. Heather, thanks for sharing this. I was just reading, sort of skimming what you wrote, and I hated every moment of it. So I'm going to read some of this out loud. Heather says, I spent a session with Adam about what I wanted to create, and he, me, pushed for what for, why, how will you know when you have it? What difference will it make? Heather said, I was frozen. I didn't have any of the answers. I felt like I was totally wrong, and I hated every minute of it, and committed to go away and create a plan with measures. Came back to Adam and had many more questions, pieces of the plan I had removed, all the pieces I struggle with myself. I left out of the plan structure, of course. So off I went to create the third iteration, but this time I was excited because I could see how I was holding myself back. And we meet next week to discuss the third edition. What's really interesting is how I don't get deep with my clients around these same pieces. What for, by when, very challenging process, very helpful, and I'm excited. Heather, thanks for sharing that, because that's such a beautiful just description of what it is to be stood for. Like, especially this part, hated every moment of it and felt wrong. That's what we do as humans. And so, being stood for to make a declaration, what most of us do is resist that, because then we don't have to confront feeling wrong or stupid or like we fucked up or like we failed. It's easier to do things like have an impossible goal, because I've already decided it's impossible. So I'm not going to succeed at anyway, and now I get to be let off the hook when I don't achieve it. What's much more inspiring to me is when someone's willing to like commit to a goal that they currently have no idea how to create. So you could call that an impossible goal, but the shift is that who they're being about it is still committed to making it happen. Typically what people do is they declare an impossible goal, and it's like, you've probably heard me say this before, it's like throwing a penny into a fountain and making a wish. Yeah, it's great, but who cares? You kind of spoke an intention into the world, but there's no commitment to that. And it's in our commitment that life actually happens, that transformation can occur. Alexandra, you say, I think that's where I try to keep myself stuck. Not try, where I keep myself stuck. I try to avoid early confrontation, which makes absolutely no sense for the process and the benefit of the client. Like I need to ease them in, or they might get scared and give up the process. My own fear projecting outwards. Yeah. Yeah. And look, we get better and better at this. So what I've learned is the start of the coaching relationship's the precedent for all the rest. So if I begin a coaching relationship with someone holding back, thinking I'm going to tell them this after X, Y, or Z, after I have the relationship built, after we're related, after they've made some progress, after whatever, well, then that's going to become the theme for the arc of our entire coaching relationship, is there's going to be some stuff that I'm going to tell them after. And you can fill in the blank, but there will always be some stuff that I'm going to tell them after. And my job, as I hold it, is that if there's something I see, to offer it to the client and then be willing to be responsible for my impact and clean up any mess. And that's what allows something beautiful to be created with the client. It's not that I'm going to give it to them and expect them to be able to handle it. It's that I'm going to do my best to give it to them in a way they can hear and then be totally willing over here to clean up whatever mess gets happened so that we can build intimacy and trust together. And from that place, my clients and I both know with each other, we can say anything in the space, anything at all. And my clients know that I'm going to share exactly what there is for me to share as their partner in this journey. And they also know they can share with me whatever shows up at all, and that we can work through it. And that creates something really poignant, really, really profound and transformational, not even just in the results that someone's creating, but in their relationship to relationship. To be in relationship with someone that way, we start to learn like, holy cow, there's an entirely new paradigm for being in relationship with people that I never saw. And so something pretty fucking cool happens from that, because not only do we start to create the tangible results we want, we start to show up differently in all of our other relationships because of the model that our coaching relationship sets. Great question, Alexandra. Thank you as always for what you provide. Let's talk about my relationship to time. I think Andrew asked this. So let me give you my previous relationship to time, and then I'll share how it is these days, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about how I've arrived here. So originally, my relationship to time was very scarce, but I believed it was one of abundance. This is often the way it goes. And I think this will make sense as I talk about it. You'll start to see it and also see a lot of people and maybe even yourself in this. So I started with time is precious. We have a limited amount of time on this life, so I'm going to make the most of the limited amount of time I have in this life. So already scarcity. We have a limited amount of time. Make the most of it, right? But it sounds very abundant. That sounds like a very empowering context, which it was initially until it stopped being. So from that starting place, I then got very like, how do I optimize my time given that it's limited? And so I became very, very adept at punctuality, managing my time, making sure I'm always aware of time so that I don't waste it because it's scarce. Can't waste it. I became very good at predicting how much time something would require so I could maximally fit in the most stuff in any given allotment of time. I got very good at using tools and structures to support me not wasting any time. So for example, and there's that, and there was also stuff like I got very good at never like losing an idea. So if I had an idea, I had a system in place to capture that idea and then put it into another system so that no good idea went wasted. Because wasting a good idea would be a form of wasting time because you only have so many ideas. Like it all fits into this scarcity around time. And so if you were to reflect this to me, there's no way in hell I would have heard it. I would have been like, I don't know what you're talking about. My time is abundant. Look at how efficient I am. Look at all the structures I've got. When I'm out walking by myself, I have a system in place so that if I have an idea about a blog post, I can do a quick voice memo. And then every Saturday, I sit down at my desk and I move all the voice memos into my Evernote folder. And then I've got everything captured as a writing note. And that way, when I sit down, I don't waste any time. I've already got and I would speak like this at this cadence. It'd be very exhausting for all of us. It would be a little bit like a metaphor for it would be if you've ever talked to someone who is worried about the amount of time they have to share something with you. So they bung it all in and they try to talk very quickly and they're trying to fit it all into like a very tight conversation and they're talking very quick and you're like, oh my God, they're fucking breathless. Take a breath so I can come down off of that. So you can imagine a whole bunch of stuff that would spin out from this. Like, for example, in conversation with me, it would be, well, like I was just speaking. There wasn't any pauses. There wasn't any slowing down. There was an incredibly articulate explanation of whatever there was for me to explain with like no pauses, no room for any of the melody. I remember one of my Jody Jan Larson, who you've probably heard me mention a number of times on this podcast and on this live show. She was supporting me, and I think it's such a funny way this stuff comes up. So I think I was in the work I was doing, we were all reading from a particular piece of paper, paragraphs. And some people, I'm a very proficient reader, good comprehension. I was always proud of that as a kid. Reading is something I'm good at. Weird flex, but we'll go with it. And some people not so good at reading. And so I was always proud of my ability to read aloud. And so, the way this was going is like someone beside me would read the first paragraph, and I'd read the next paragraph, and then the next, and we'd just go around the circle. And I was reading the paragraph, and I was reading it, and someone stopped me, and they're like, Adam, could you take a breath and slow down? And you're reading. And I was like, sure, I'll try whatever you're doing, dummy, because I can't, right? This is my blind spot. I can't see this stuff. Nor, by the way, can you. And so, like, sure, dummy, whatever. And I stopped and I read it slower, which felt stupid, but I did it to appease these morons. And then they asked, like, hey, anyone notice an impact when Adam read that slower? And people are like, yeah, I noticed I wasn't holding my breath anymore. And another person was like, yeah, I feel more relaxed. So just a very simple example, right? Like by me slowing down and allowing more abundance, I'm allowing more time, that gave everyone else a sense of ease. So what got created is you'd be around me and you'd be with this person going so quick, pushing everything into these little tinier and tinier windows of availability. And where you were left was sort of like, time did not feel abundant. So I created this impact everywhere and I couldn't see it at all because I was convinced that I was maximizing my use of time and therefore time was obviously abundant. It was as scarce as fuck. Do I have to say AF? Is that what we're saying now? It was as scarce AF as fuck. That's how scarce it was. You get the double whammy. I like using acronyms wrong. It's fun for me. So from there, project management, natural fit. And to be clear, I was doing this before I ever got into project management. Project management was a natural step into for me. I'd been kind of already thinking along these lines. And then when I left, when I gave my my notice at my job that I was leaving, I was going to go back to school, I had 3 weeks off. And what I did during those 3 weeks is I ran a experiment on biphasic sleeping. Biphasic sleeping is the idea, I think famously Kramer on Seinfeld practiced it because Leonardo da Vinci practiced it and blah, 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 blah. There's, you can find evidence for this. The idea of biphasic sleeping is that by putting your sleep into 2 different windows, you can sleep less overall. So if I slept 5 hours during the night and then took a 1-hour nap, I will have the same level of of rest, my body will be as rested as if I slept 8 hours in one sitting. That's the notion. Bye, Carrie. Thanks for hanging out. And so I did this experiment. And my thinking was like, well, I'm going back to law school, and they tell me that that means time is going to be scarcer because there's more I'm going to do. So here's how I'm going to get more time. So you can just see me, like, if you imagine time's a grapefruit, I'm squeezing every last drop out of it. I'm just squeezing so hard, wringing it out. And the experiment was not that much fun. First of all, biphasic sleeping, while I could function mentally, I had that feeling, when you just feel like your eyelids are heavy and they feel sandy. I never felt fully rested. Mentally, I could operate. Second, it was weird because I was getting up at like 2 in the morning, and then I would go right. Or like, what are you doing up at 2 in the morning? The world's not doing that, Adam. Well, it's great. I'm working on my projects. I'm getting stuff done. I'm updating my blog. And then I would go to sleep at like whatever time I would go to sleep at. So it was kind of like a wacky system. But it's another example of how I was fitting my scarcity of time into this notion of creating abundance. I was trying to create abundance inside a box labeled scarcity. And that's what a lot of people do. That's what people do with money. When someone grows up with a story that money is scarce, they're in this box called money is scarce, and then they try to create abundance stuck inside that box. And so what you can do is you can create this illusion for yourself that money is abundant. This is what happens when people grow up poor. They never do the deeper work to really address their story. Instead, they try to change their circumstances to have a different experience. So you have someone for which the story is money is scarce, and they try to earn enough money to change that. And what you end up with is someone with a ton of money who's constantly worried about money. This is why this is I'm digressing a little bit, but this is why when coaches are like, I want to work with people with more money because I'm tired of their money story getting in the way, you're fooling yourself. The more money people have, the more typically concerned they are about their money. So don't fall for that trap. And this is what happens when we're stuck inside a box that we can't see, and then we try to create the opposite experience from within it. That's what I was doing with time. Time is scarce. Now let's create abundance from there. So, natural fit for project management, natural fit into law, completely natural fit into law. In law, you're doing things like managing your time down to 10% chunks. That's 6 minutes. So you're tracking your time on any given file that you're billing to a client in 6 minute intervals. And you know what's hilarious is when I talk to lawyers about what they want, often one of the first things they're looking for is better time management. How hilarious is that? See you, Allison. Have a great weekend. Better time management. These people manage their time in 6 minute chunks. What do you need? 3 minute chunks? 1.5 minute chunks? I don't mean to dismiss them or be derisive of that. I just want to point to the paradoxes that happen when we've got a fundamental context we're operating in, a box, and then try to create this experience of abundance from within that box, and just how silly it is. This is that thing I was talking about where we're like going all the like just the longest route possible to get somewhere because our box doesn't allow us to go from here to here. So that was my relationship to time for 15 years, from about the age of 15 to about the age of 30. And I was getting better and better and better at the strategies and ways of showing up in my life that this relationship to time allowed for and dictated were the best things to do. And then I chose into a leadership structure that did a couple things. First, it was a demand, an ongoing demand for me not to continue inside of my already proven range, but to grow my range and create breakthroughs outside of it. And second, it gave me things that I had to do, things I chose into and committed as a leader, things I took on to own that were completely impossible from my existing paradigm. So the way that looks in practice is that I would be like, okay, great, I'll take this thing on. And then immediately be like, I don't have enough time for this. There's no way I have enough time for this. And I would try then to solve that problem by like packing my time in ever more tightly and figuring out even more efficient ways, basically trying to create a new result from the same strategies of the past, which will never work. But before we can come to that surrender, we have to kind of, in a way, prove to ourselves unwittingly that it won't work. And so I tried and tried and tried, and I got frustrated and I got mad at the people leading me. And I was like, "You guys are idiots. Fuck you for this. This is unreasonable, blah, blah, blah." And I kicked and screamed and threw tantrums. And they stood for me. They stood for me to create a breakthrough rather than to go back to the world I already knew and was capable of doing, or giving up here rather than creating the breakthrough. And they stood for me to create a breakthrough. And it was so unpleasant and it was exhausting. And what was exhausting was not the actual breakthrough, it was how much I resisted the breakdown. The way that looked was trying harder and harder all of the old strategies, trying to strategize and fit into my calendar. Maybe I need a third calendar here and then I'll use different colors of calendar. No, Adam, it's not what you need. So in the end, this breakdown happened. I started to need to ask for help and to look for other ways to be about this, to change my relationship to time. I can't, it's been a while since I created that breakthrough, and I can tell you how messy it was, but I can't remember the exact steps I walked through. But what I can share now is what my relationship to time looks like on this side, and some of what I find amusing in the world now. So these days, time's really abundant, not in the sense that I don't have an appreciation for how precious life is, but at the same time, I really trust that I'm going to get exactly what I need to get out of life, and life is going to get exactly what it needs to get out of me. And I don't need to strategize or force that some way. I don't need to do a bunch of management to make sure that the right things happen. I can trust, I can give that over to spirit or to whoever you choose to have this relationship with beyond yourself. I can, I don't track the ideas that come anymore. When I have a great idea for a post, I'm like, okay, I should write about that. And then sometimes I sit down and I remember it and I write about it, and other times it's gone. And yeah, that's frustrating sometimes. 'Cause I'm like, damn, that was a good thing. But I know that there'll be the next thing to write about, and then the next thing after that, and that there's no right one thing. I can let go of how life's meant to unfold so I can just be with it as it unfolds, the way it unfolds. So that gives me a ton of freedom and space. And it means that I don't have to pack myself so tightly. I don't have to have this experience that was really common back in the day where people are like, "Hey, can you do something?" I'm like, "Oh, I wish I could. I'm just so busy. Maybe in a month." Now, having said that, I still recognize like I haven't thrown all that out. I've just expanded my range. So what that means is I still very much use a calendar. And when people reach out and say, "Hey, can we have a conversation together? I'd really like to catch up with you." I'm like, "Yeah, totally. It's going to be in about 3 weeks. That's where I'm booking out." And some days I'll look at my calendar. I'm like, "Actually, I can fit. How about tomorrow at this time? It would feel good for me to do that." So there's simultaneously like spaciousness and spontaneity available, but also I really honor not from a place of like time or what I need to do, but just what serves me. And what I start to realize is what serves me is 4 hours on the phone, and that's a full day for me. Anything more than that, and it just starts to be like, it's not that I can't expand my capacity. It's not that I can't handle it. It's just that what feels best for me is often like after 4 hours, I'm like, that's a full day. I feel good about what I've done, who I've been. I feel filled up there, and my cup feels full. Now I want to go do something else. So there's room for all of it, as opposed to just using a calendar or as I was creating that breakthrough, initially the next step was like, fuck the calendar. I'm not scheduling anything. And it'll all be free form. And it turned out that didn't work that great either. So I noticed that like scheduling stuff, and there's other things too. Like if people reach out to spontaneously set something up, sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I'd love to. Can you email me just so I don't lose it? Because that's my trusted system. So that kind of gives you an idea of my relationship to time these days. And what I would say is it feels very abundant. It's interesting because sometimes people reach out and I think they're trying to be polite or maybe deferential or maybe honor my time, but they're real wacky and they'll be like, I know your time is valuable and I know you're super busy. And I'm like, nah, my time's abundant. I got tons of time. What do you need? Like, do you want to hop on the phone? What's the deal? So I have time for whatever is showing up. Where I get to look instead of do I have time for this is what would serve this person? Is it to have another conversation or is it to invite them into something more powerful or to make a commitment in their lives or something like that? And what would serve me? Would it serve me to try to cram this in? Would it serve me to have a fifth or a sixth call tomorrow? Or would it actually serve me to say, I'd love to connect with you, but in 3 weeks? So time doesn't dictate what I say yes or no to anymore the way it used to, which is pretty fucking cool. Randy, nice to see you, man. Been a while. I'd love to hear from you, man. Shoot me a message. Let me know what you're up to, how life looks. It says, entrepreneurs, I want to create a life of freedom. Then they go and always take on more to create the freedom. In return, never getting the freedom. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, Randy. Brilliantly put. It's another funny version I see of this is people being like, I really want peace, and then they're frantically trying to get everything done in order to create peace, which makes sense on the level of like getting stuff done. But if we just look at who you're being, it's like who you're being is frantic and hoping that that's going to end up giving you the being of peace. And that'll never work. Or at best, it'll give you a short-term experience of peace before you get frantic again. So these things are kind of funny. The other thing I really see and find really funny, not from like a oh you stupid fools, but just it's amusing to me because I can see myself in it and I can see how much sense it makes from that old belief that I operated within. Are things like people are really like Jim Quick, who does speed reading. People are like, yeah, speed reading. I'm going to learn to speed read, and then I can read more books faster. Or people that listen to podcasts at 1.5 times or two times, and they're really proud of this, which is totally fine. It's great to do that. But I'm like, what's the fucking rush? Like, what I notice is in that is kind of reflected like this idea of like getting through the book to get the idea. And it's like there's not really a love just of the experience of reading the book in the moment. It's like I just need to, if I could not have the reading process and just directly have the information in my brain, then that would be perfect. And what I've that's really, in my opinion, time dictating how things go. Whereas for me, I really these days I'm like, I don't need to rush through any of this stuff. I'm just going to read. I'm going to enjoy the process of reading. And so what that does is it creates this experience of abundance where every moment you can be in that moment rather than trying to rush through that moment. Oh, could I experience this moment at 2 times so I can get to the next moment when I have all the information? What for? Is you can then rush to the next book. So it's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with this, right? It's just kind of from from this place, it leaves there's not a lot of room for spaciousness. Huh. Yes, time doesn't dictate what we say yes or no to. Yeah, it's neat to have to be in this place, and I will own like that time context still comes up from time to time. It still shows up sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, I feel busy. The other thing I'll share is that like one thing I've noticed really makes a difference for me sometimes is just writing to-do lists. This book right here is just the to-do list book. So every page is like a to-do list I've written, and not every checkbox is like checked off. This one's checked off, these ones aren't. So writing a to-do list for me is not, this is what you must do. See you, Alexandra, have a great weekend. This is not what you must do, Adam. It's more that the act of writing stuff on paper with a checkbox next to it is soothing for me. And so I still do stuff like that. It just doesn't have the same must do, the same urgency, the same craziness that it used to. See, Anna, have a good walk. Nice to see you guys signing off too. That's cool. I love that. We've got another 23 minutes or so to go and a little bit more tea. So I'm going to hit up some of these other jammies that people have been generous enough to provide. Where do you feel like you excel in this area? Oh, that was about time. So I'm not going to talk about that. But you may have seen, well, first, the topic I'll talk about here is marketing and branding as a coach. Specifically, though, marketing and branding as Adam Quiney. I want to share a little bit about that. I'll also share how did I get to this topic, which is Facebook has those backgrounds, or a friend of mine called them text cards. So if you want to make a post that's kind of eye-catching, you can use one of their stupid backgrounds. They have like 7 backgrounds I like, and the rest I hate. They're ugly. And so I reached out to my designer, my graphic designer, and I said, hey, can you guys make me just some, I want them to be the same size, but I want to be able to write on them without the limitations of textbook or Facebook's stuff. And I want my branding. I want my colors. I want it to be recognizable as, oh, this is Adam's thing, because that would be cool. So I did that and I asked for topics and I got some topics, and then a bunch of people were just like, hey, what's with this new branding thing? This is cool. I like it. It looks great. I'm like, that's great, but please give me a topic too. And so one of them said, well, talk about marketing and branding as a coach. So that's how we've arrived here. So what I'm going to talk about is my own journey through this, and that'll probably be where we end up leaving off. So I really want to go to the bathroom first, though, so I don't have to be, you know what? We're going to be on a quick break. This will be a 30-second break. I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll come back, and then it's going to be nice and abundant in time. There'll be no rushing. So hang tight. Be right back. All right, here we are. How many Facebook live shows can you come and watch while the host goes to the bathroom? How often does that happen? It's something very special that we're creating this week on a very special live show with Adam Quiney, tackling going to the bathroom. Anyhow, see you, Heather. Have a great weekend. Um, so, what was I about to talk about? I was about to talk about marketing and branding. And hey, Andrew. So, where I began in this journey, like this is how I arrived at my branding, and I'll talk about what's next and what I'm present to these days. So originally, when I first started as a coach, I reached out to my good friend Davin. Davin is one of my oldest and best friends. We know each other since we were about, I think, around 12. We were playing Magic the Gathering together. We met each other at a card shop downtown. This was when Magic the Gathering first ever came out. It started in Seattle and came to Victoria very quickly. So we're OGs in that. I remember meeting him there, and I also knew Davin from the BBSs that existed at the time. So BBSs were pre-internet, when you had a shitty modem and you dialed into someone else's computer, and they had it set up to welcome you, and you could play ugly games, and you'd leave messages to the next person that logged in. And so he was one of the people I kind of knew from that world, the early days of the internet. Well, pre-internet. This is not even internet, proto-internet. You could almost think of it. So I reached out to my friend Davin, who had been and was a graphic designer, and I said, "Hey, would you be willing to barter with me? I'll coach you a bit, and you can design, like, help me with my branding." And so he was like, "Yeah, totally, let's do that." And we started, and I coached him a little bit and supported him with the work I was like some of the work I was doing. This was very early work, and you know, he's one of my oldest and closest friends. So how powerful can that coaching be? But hey, having any kind of conversation can make a difference. And so while I don't think he really got my best art, he got the art I had at the time, and I got the art he had to provide. And so together and with his support, we created the first brand I began operating under, which was Evergrowth Coaching and Consulting. We made a cool logo. He figured out stuff like text and the fonts that represent my brand. And so that's what we created together, which was great. Hey, Rachel, nice to see you. And so Evergrowth was the brand I had. That was the sort of way I operated. And it was a nice, like, that's a good brand. We actually, rather than just sit by myself and try to think this stuff up, which I did not have much capacity for, and I don't know that I really would be the best person to do that anyhow. I had this friend who was really skilled at what he did support me through this. And so I had a brand that I think was quite good for a new coach. And then I began to grow and to take on my own work and to learn to express myself more and to transform. And so, just to give you the full timeline, I started working with the very first coach I ever worked with, who was a former lawyer. I took the training he took called Erickson Coaching Federation. I think they named themselves that because it sounds so similar to International Coach Federation, the ICF, the body that regulates our industry. But never mind that. And then I got this support from Davin, and he helped me create that brand. So up to this point, I haven't done any transformational work. I've done facilitative coaching, and I've been trained in facilitative coaching, which means I'm not addressing the box you're caught in. I'm only working on the surface for the most part of what you want to do. What's the project you want to take on? What do we need to make happen? How do we design a project plan around that? How do we make you keep moving forward? Blah, blah, blah. So then I get into this real transformational work with accomplishment coaching, and I'm working with my own coach and working on the leadership teams and doing all this sort of stuff. And then I start to connect with Rich Litvin and I start to lead his leadership teams. And there comes this point where Bay has now joined as a coach. And rather than create our own brand, we're like, well, let's have Bay come in under the Evergrowth Coaching brand name. And so we got to this point where we were both pretty clear, like Evergrowth Coaching, great brand. A lot of coaches would probably love to have that as their starting brand. And it was too small for who we'd become. The fullest expression of who we were was not anywhere near captured by that brand. And especially for two of us, right? We were kind of hindered in how we could show up in the world. It was almost as though you had had someone sit down and design like a set of outfits for me before I'd really done any work to be fully expressed. And then I show up and I'm this big person, and we're trying to use those same outfits to dress both Bay and myself, who have undergone a whole bunch of transformation. It just doesn't really work. So that was the point where we'd made the scary choice to reach out to someone that we'd met at an event and say, hey, could you support us with this? We need to bring someone on board. And this was a really challenging thing for me to do because up until this point, I was dead set against branding and marketing. And the reason I was dead set against branding and marketing is because I noticed that's where most coaches aimed themselves initially once they started this work, because that let them get off the hook from going and being with people and talking to them and coaching them and proposing to them. The real rubber hits the pavement of coaching. So we'd created successful, thriving coaching practices, but we were just clear there was like a bigger step to get to. And we'd kind of gotten there by eschewing branding. We'd be like, no, marketing is dumb. We're not going to do marketing because that's not really the work. The work is going and connecting with people, being with people, supporting them, serving them, getting present to their possibility, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And so that belief had supported us up to a point and then no further. It had supported us to get to where we were, but then we were kind of stuck. And it was time to let go of the breakthrough belief that had gotten us here so we could create a new one. And so that's why it was so scary. It was scary because I was like, the only path to growth is ontological. You only work on your being. Fuck the outer stuff. It's only being. That was no longer serving us. And so I had to let that go and start to surrender to A, the process, B, to trust the person I'd chosen to support us, and C, to let go of my own resistance, well, really to distinguish my own resistance and to release it, and then to, again, choose back into the process that I'd chosen originally. So how that worked was pretty clanky because I had a bunch of stops and stuff in the way, and Rachel, who's put a heart in the comments, you can see her name there, supported me with this a lot. I'd bring this to her because I needed support to like let go of my own righteousness about how this was dumb what we were doing, and we were going in the direction I didn't want to go, because the direction I didn't want to go was inside my existing range, and there was something larger I was called into, and that's why I'd chosen this support in the first place. Some of the stuff that came up for me was like the notion that like, oh, who you are at and part of your people is like brilliant. So how do we capture that? And like, what about like the smartest person in the room, or, stuff like that? And that was frustrating to me because I was so much more than brilliance, as are my people. Part of who I am is a man with a massive heart, not just a smart guy. And I'm hilarious, and I'm a really great dancer, and I'm funky, and I have tattoos, and all of this sort of stuff that, like, the smartest person in the room, it just captures the smart guy. And I start thinking about Albert Einstein, or, like, the professor with chalks all smeared along his back. And so I I was left kind of frustrated and struggling with that. And I started to, where I had to get to, like the opportunity for me was to see that that's the thin edge of the wedge. I was in a mastermind at this time, and I brought this to the four guys that were in my mastermind with me. And they shared, like, all of that other stuff, the big heart, the whatever, that's great. You can totally bring that, but you have to give people a point to start connecting with you. And that's what this might be for you, Adam. The subjective experience your people might have. And so we settled on the smartest person in the room, exclusive coaching for the smartest person in the room, which was really edgy for me. Who am I to say I'm the smartest person in the room? I'm not. I'm just some dickhead. That's my story about me. But at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, I'm smarter than all you dummies. That guy exists too. And so, like my belief about any good niche or brand, it's edgy for us to own it. It's edgy for me to say I'm one of the smartest people in the room, or even just I have the subjective experience. And what's funny is often people have that experience with me. They get into a conversation with me and they're like, I looked at your website and some parts of it really resonate and some parts I don't feel at all. And I'm like, oh yeah, what parts? And they start to talk, and it's usually that notion of being the smartest person in the room. They're like, oh, that's not really me. And then I'm like, oh, got it. So you can resonate with, like, being bored in your life, but, like, the subjective experience of feeling like you're smarter than other people, that's not there. And there's usually this moment where they kind of, like, they you can almost feel them, like, let it go a little bit and maybe sheepishly be like, "Ah, actually kind of often do feel that way. And I'm so embarrassed to say that. That's what a good brand does, I believe, is it scary for us because we're letting the world see a part of ourselves that is edgy for us to own. And what that does is it lets your people out there who are similar to you, they're analogous. They're your people because they're like you. It lets them see you modeling something that has not yet, it's there for them to start to own as well. So that brand has been around now for probably about 4 years, and it's been a great brand and it's been really good. The only trouble is that feels too small now. That feels like too small a part of the story of who I am and who I am as a leader and as man. And there seems to be like a bigger story to be told, and I don't know what that is yet. And so where we're at is kind of a couple things. One, we're hiring a like a social media team, a team that can take the content we create, the live show like this, all of this sort of stuff, and get it to more people, get it to a bigger audience. That's just not, I'm not interested in doing that. Some people are like, oh, work with me and I'll coach you to do that. I don't want to be coached to do that. I want someone to take that out of my hands. Do that for me. I'm clear on what I am filled up and love doing and want to put into the world. Now I need someone who can take that and then do whatever alchemy there is to do to get that into the ears of more people so that more people can get the gift of this work. And frankly, so more people can get the gift of my art as expressed by me. Um, Secondary to that, we're also looking at, like, what's the next, like, who can support us with the next story of us to be told? What's next there? And again, these aren't cheap things. And so these are like their own version of scary, right? There's a, I can feel the universe. I can feel the divinity of all this, the divine timing. And just on some level, I can trust what's next called for from me is to go deeper into that work again. And, like, how do I tell my story again in a way that's even more compelling and allows people to see more of themselves in what there is here? It might be even more edgy for me to start to own so that we can land and resonate more powerfully, more potently with the people that are here to be resonated with. Not everyone. Some people here, like if we go to the old example, some people are like, oh, I don't, I don't know, Adam, that smartest people in the room thing, like I think maybe you should change that because I think you turn people away. Like for me, it turned me off. And while I appreciate that willingness to provide that feedback, my experience is often that there's one of two things happening. One, they can't yet own that they're the smartest people in the room too. So there's kind of that like sheepish, they're like, what they've learned to do is like, I would never, they'll say things like, oh, I'm not the smartest person. I'm not even that smart. They do that like humble kind of like, I'm not that big. I'm not that brilliant. I just know, I just ask the questions of the smartest people. And I'm like, yeah, bullshit. I know how to feel and see people. You're brilliant. You just can't own it yet. So that's sometimes what's happening when people say that. And the other thing that's sometimes happening is people are like, I don't know, it just didn't resonate with me. And that's okay because your brand doesn't need to resonate with people. It doesn't have to resonate with everyone. And so if it doesn't resonate with someone, that's cool. That's okay too. So, as far as like branding and marketing for coaches, I think of it like maybe a little bit like how we dress, our clothing. If you never do that work, you're going to miss out on something because you'll start to address how you show up in the world, but the presentation, the way you show up in the world is going to have like this kink where it's like, oh, that's who Adam is, but then that's weird. That shows up a little off key. And it's not that the kink means you can never connect with people, they'll never resonate with you. It just means there's something they have to get past. There's a inconsistency or an incongruity that shows up that they have to kind of like get beyond to then be with you. The other thing I think about it is for most coaches that are fixated on this, they're using branding and marketing to try to solve the underlying problem that they're scared or struggling to create clients. And for those people, I don't think branding or marketing will make the difference they're hoping it will. For those people, I think what they should do, one is take the creating clients course, but two, like tackle the actual thing that's going on internally, the ontological work that's there for them to take on so that they can create clients regardless of their branding or their marketing, rather than trying to solve this underneath problem and the symptom of it, which is they're not creating clients, by slapping marketing and branding over top of it. That almost never works. And what happens, even when you get the best funnel, is you get a whole bunch of leads coming your way and nothing happens with them. So now all you've done is you just created more work for yourself, and it's all in the way of doing the deeper work that might actually have you go somewhere, that might actually have you create the impact that you really want to create. You just don't have time for it now. Actually, I got all these leads, and because only 1 out of 30 leads converts, and that's just the way the numbers go, I guess I just need to like put all my time here working with these. No, 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 no. The opportunity is to really see like, 1 out of every 30 leads, that sucks. I could do better than that. Maybe there's something internally. Maybe there's something about the way I'm showing up that's getting in the way of that. What'd you write here, Andrew? So great to hear about this experience I went through. You definitely came from the marketing side and really seen the impact of the coaching that is outside of the facilitative. Yeah. Transformation, baby. That's the game that I'm here to play. Okay, I'm gonna wind down there. My phone's blowing up. I think I'm meant to be on a Zoom call, but I'm not sure. The rest of my day looks like a breathwork session that someone offered me that I was like, sure, I'll do that with you. So that's going to start in about an hour, and then I'm off for the rest of the weekend. So that'd be pretty nice. Two things you should know about if any of what I say resonates with you. The first is the client creation course, where the client creation course for most people, it's the thing that they're hoping to get from learning how to do branding and marketing. Like it's what we're intending to provide is the experience and the shift in the way sales and creating clients goes for you that people reach for marketing and branding hoping that's going to be the solution. Sort of like if you had flesh eating bacteria, the experience you want is that your foot is healed and fine and good. Branding and marketing is like putting a band-aid over it. It like gives you this temporary kind of false belief and experience like, oh, it's all good now, but not really. The root is still there. And so that's what the client creation course does. It's 10 weeks. It's 5 2-hour coaching calls where we actually like move the stuff internally out of the way, and 10 hours worth of video content where we teach you we pull down the existing awful doesn't work kind of paradigm that we're all taught, and then we build a foundation upon which you can really really create like a sense of groundedness and sort of trust and relax and peace about creating clients. A lot of what people leave on the other side with this is a release of all the anxiety, feeling like, oh wow, it's so much better. I don't feel nervous or afraid or any of that stuff that was there. It feels so much easier. So that's the first thing. If that's of interest, I've put something in the comments. You can go to adamquiney.com/client creation, all one word, and learn about it there. And then the other thing is if you want more transformation, if you want a deeper experience of yourself as leader and the ability to develop leadership by coaching other people, then you should reach out for a conversation with me about the Forge, which is the other thing I'm putting in the comments. The Forge is it's the group program that my wife Bay, who's also a masterful coach, and I run. We created this after spending years, almost a decade, in the coaching and leadership profession, like both training it and going to other places and supporting their leadership teams, and really kind of coming to a conclusion that there's a real gap. And what that gap creates is a lot of conversation about leadership and about coaching, but not actually moving you into the actual lived in experience of being leader and being coach. And so what we do is we create that experience for you because that's where transformation lies. So you don't do this work and then leave better equipped with more information that you can then figure out how to fit into the situation you end up in. What you leave is being a leader and being a coach. Like that's ingrained in your bone marrow. And the consequence of that is you don't have to think. There's plenty of information, but you don't have to think about it and run some kind of mental calculus to figure out what to do with the client. It's already there in you. Just like you don't have to figure out how to balance your bicycle when you're riding your bike. It's already in your bone marrow. You just know what to do. That's the impact of the Forge. So if either of those seems like something you want to have a conversation about, please reach out to us. The client creation course starts in May. Um, I think this will probably be the last iteration for a little while. I'm not certain about that, but likely this will be the last time I run it for a little bit of time, maybe a year or so. The Forge starts in September. We are already halfway full. And that means there's about 6 seats left, I think. And every year it fills up faster. And every year we hear two things. One is, oh, September, that's a long time away. Let me think about it and get back to you. And then usually a couple months later from the same person, we hear, okay, I'm ready. What? It's full, but I really wanted to do it. And so if you feel called towards this, don't let yourself be that person. Reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to have a conversation with you about it. I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Thanks for hanging out all the way to the end. Thank you, Andrew, Alexandra, Bob. Who else gave me some? Andrea, Sherifat. I really appreciate everyone contributing topics to the live show. And have an amazing weekend. We'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.